Are we on?
We are on.
Great.
Well,
Good morning, everyone. Since it's a live webinar, we'll give it a couple minutes for people to load in. Hopefully, they were already loading in. We won't wait too long, though. Uh, we know you're all busy. Kimmy, what's up? Awesome.
hey,
The chat's working, folks. That's good. What day is it? I'm making more frequent appearances coming out of paternity leave these days, but that doesn't mean my sleep has improved at all. So this webinar is brought to you by Celsius, not officially, but
And Diet
unofficially.
Coke.
And Diet Coke. Ryan, what's your caffeine of choice?
I'm just water, like a regular person. Sorry.
He's on a health kick, folks.
Don't listen to me, kids.
How's your Whoop score doing?
I think we brought that our average age after that last sip.
All right. Okay. Let's see. We're just gonna jump right in, I think. It's been pretty quiet the past quarter, so I don't know if we're gonna run the full hour. We don't have a whole lot to talk about, right?
No, nothing's happened in the last, couple weeks.
What was Q1? January, February, March. What's happened since March? Oh, I don't know. What side of the plan do we want to talk about? There's the regulated cannabis side. We've had rescheduling, the adult use, Schedule 3 hearings. Those just wrapped. A lot of uncertainty. I think, we even seen a new legalization bill that has cropped up that is not the ideal that you would expect to see in a legalization bill, but here it is. So that's all moving forward. People are applying for DEA licenses. There's people uplisting to the NYSE, and still a lot of uncertainty. And then we have, obviously, what's happening in hemp. We're running towards this November 12th deadline, and people are launching new bills faster than we can keep track. We have the Barr-Craig bill. I'll leave the reporting of all the acronyms to Diana. We have the Van Dyne beverage bill out of Texas, and probably two or three others at this point. I do think I just heard about a new one. Anyways, from a business standpoint, this only creates a more volatile environment. And so we feel that very acutely because we speak with our partners and our customers every day, the brands serving both sides of the plant, the distributors and retailers not only navigating this period of uncertainty, but also trying to game plan for what happens after November 12th. And those of us that have operated in the highly regulated 280E impacted side of cannabis, there's a lot to learn and a lot to be considered. And so we're going to try to get through as much of that as possible today. We had a bunch of questions come in, I think about 50. So we're going to try to distill it into some segments. If you have questions that come up, please drop them in the chat. Kimmy Gamez, party of one. You can be the first to ask a question. But because there has been so much legislatively, I think it is only obvious that we should start there. So Diana, we did have a question come in from Kia, and apologies if I mispronounced that name. But what are your thoughts on the upcoming federal deadline for hemp products?
Sure. And there's been a lot of attention to this week, particularly with all of the brands and partners getting so actively involved in the consumer awareness campaign and the grassroots efforts to send letters to Congress, which is critical, particularly this week. I've spoken a lot about this publicly. I envision that we know that there are bills that have been introduced. The Lawful Hemp Protection Act is the Barr-Craig bill, for example. We are awaiting other bill introductions from the Senate side that will complement that. But the underlying message here is we need more time to get one of those bills across. Like a big regulatory bill like that is not going to get passed before November 12th. So right now our focus is getting an extension that buys us more time to get that regulation across. So you will hear a lot of messaging from our group, HBA, WSWA, the Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation, a lot of people focusing on showing dedication to regulation so that we can warrant the ask for the extension. So right now, many of you are already engaged on the consumer awareness campaign, sending letters to the Senate to ask them to put an extension clause into their CR, which is looking to be introduced potentially this week with a vote potentially next week. But again, those timelines can change. We were talking about the bar bill, for example, for months, waiting for that to be introduced. So those timelines can change. The House was very early in passing their CR. But one thing I want everyone on this call to really understand is with that extension ask, we want that extension to be in the upcoming CR package that will be voted on by the House and the Senate in September, which means it's not just about getting this added into the Senate. Once it's in the Senate CR, the House is going to have to look at that. They're going to have to vote on it. The House and the Senate have to agree on what the CR package looks like in order for it to pass. So right now our focus might be on the Senate, but those letters, send all the letters to all of your representatives, because making sure that they are hearing from their constituents is going to be critical to us getting that extension ask passed in the September CR. If I was a betting woman, I think the September CR could have an extension that takes us into December for an end of year package, because voting on a complete budget in September before an election can be complicated. And frankly, they just don't have that much time. So I could see an extension being very short term in the interim, and then us buying ourselves more time in December, or getting one of those larger legislative packages, if we can get enough momentum behind any of these bills, passed in December, which provides a longer runway for us that takes us into the next Congress.
Yeah, I just want to pause because there are so many times where people ask, what do you think is going to happen? And you just said it, and it's not often that people are willing to stick their neck out and be like, this is what's going to happen. You didn't say that. You said if you were a betting woman, which I'm a betting man, so let's bet. You think that come September, there's a little bit of breathing room that extends the November deadline to December, so signaling in September is good, but unfortunately we're in this time period right now where we're hearing from brands that there is starting to be some drawdown with wholesalers. They're starting to feel a little bit of cash flow pinch already. There's going to be a lot of damage done between now and September, but at least it's not November. But in some ways, whether you're measuring from September or November, like it's either a month or 3 months. That's not that
Right.
much more room. So what could we actually get done in that short amount of extra time?
The idea would be to get momentum behind as many of these bills as possible. I do anticipate that there will be an extension bill introduced that provides guardrails to clean up the marketplace, because the number one thing we hear from Congress is that they want to eliminate the high dose synthetic products that are being marketed to kids. Without an extension including some sort of language that allows for enforcement to clean up the marketplace, it's going to be very hard to pass something through Congress. But Ben is right. We do not want to see just, hey, we got another 3 months. That doesn't help any of us here. It doesn't help the farmers. And the farmers definitely are going to need an answer, because they have product that they're going to harvest and maybe not a place for it to go. Just like how we have beverages and many of the people on this call have hemp products that they might not be able to move come November 12th. So the goal is, again, the short-term extension is what works for Congress in terms of getting them past the election. That is their goal with that funding package. No one wants a shutdown before an election. Republicans and Democrats do not want that. So I think the extension being in the CR, for those of you who are like, what does that tell retailers? An extension getting in the CR doesn't answer what happens to bev specifically. I mean, unless we're lucky and there's language that specifically calls out beverage. But what it does show is that there is a signal that Congress knows we need to regulate this versus the full-blown ban. And that is a huge signal that we have not seen prior, because of obviously what happened last year. And then to give you a little bit more hope, we do have a number of champions in the House and Senate. We have much more champions than we've had before, and they're willing to become more vocal, which we've seen in the last few months through bill introductions, extension asks in the Farm Bill. While some things weren't germane, all of that momentum is going to come to light again when it comes to whatever the regulatory fix is, whether it's a short-term extension or a longer-term extension or a regulatory bill that does pass in the December end of year package.
Okay, so I think that should suffice for Guillerme's question, but there are two other very kind of distinct questions here, and so maybe rapid fire. So it says, discuss the Lawful Hemp Act and converted THC legality moving forward. So let's just focus on converted THC. Like, where do we think this is landing right now with Congress?
I think Congress right now, unfortunately, the word synthetic has been really made the big villain of all of this. I think there's a lot of fear and confusion around how to define synthetics. Right now, the bar bill does allow for converted materials, but there is a clause in there that also asks the FDA to provide an approved list of cannabinoids. So that approved list of cannabinoids will define whether or not THCV or CBN or some of those cannabinoids that require conversion for commercialization are permitted. So there's some additional layers to this that don't make it nearly as straightforward as, is this permitted or not? But right now, converted cannabinoids based on the language should be permitted. But again, it depends on some of those other guardrails that are put in place. There were also some 100% synthetic cannabinoids that were specifically highlighted that they are banned. So like the HHCs.
Mm, mm. Well, the FDA has been notably slow at developing cannabinoid lists of any sort, if anyone's been tracking the FDA progress. One more question, and then we'll move on to the next segment. If the Senate includes the hemp extension in the CR, any chance it's going to be stripped during reconciliation? And this comes from John D.
Yes, there is that chance. And that's why I kind of started off that conversation with getting past the Senate is step one here. Getting it included in the Senate CR is step one. But step two and step three is getting the House and the Senate to agree. So the Senate can still fight back. We know that we have, Andy Harris, for example, has definitely been vocal about wanting to ban hemp or intoxicating hemp rather. So we know that we have some challenges there, but, we've also made a lot of traction with groups like Congressman Fry, who's been a very loud advocate and coming from a state that I don't think people initially thought would become an advocate for this category. We've seen a lot of momentum. So we have champions in the House. We also have some more champions in the Senate, but this is not done just because language gets into the Senate CR that allows for an extension. We will continue to have to fight on both sides, and there will be a meeting in the middle that gets passed eventually. And we hope that that includes the hemp extension.
All right. So I think that's a pretty good encapsulation of what we know now, what we're anticipating, what we're able to hopefully anticipate. Obviously, this is having a massive impact on the supply chain operations, whether it's the impact of the uncertainty or the forecasted impact of these changes, right? And so I think there's a lot that we can talk about here. Ryan, I would love to kind of get your perspective on just what's happening on the ground, from everyone that you're speaking to, everyone that you're hearing, like how are people reacting? What are people doing to prepare? And then we'll get into kind of the game planning about the various scenarios that lay ahead.
I think it's really tough. I think it's really tough from an operational standpoint. When I think about the work that it takes to move these beverages into a retail store and out the door, I think about the salespeople, I think about trade marketing, I think about the efforts it takes, and I think the uncertainty is really difficult. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of months there have been massive layoffs from company to company. It's really affected a lot of people who've helped build this category, but without the uncertainty, it's really difficult for these organizations and companies to continue to support it. And so I think while there's a lot of hope and we feel very confident about where this is going, I think even living from extension to extension make it very, very difficult and a very tough pill to swallow. And so, my heart and my thoughts go out to a lot of people who are living this day to day, and the people who really fought to help us get to where we are today are ultimately going to be dealing with a turmoilous stage. But I think the next phase is really interesting. I think the big thing and the biggest sentiment that I continue to see is a couple things. One, we're starting to see a lot of groups who are venturing out into different product categories. We recently saw Cantrip launch an entirely new brand And so, credit to that team who is really taking a stab at joining into the functional beverage space. We're hearing stories of top brands in our space who are entering energy. We're seeing soda brands pop up. We're seeing groups get extremely creative on one key thing. How do we continue to keep the relationships we built alive, keep our retail partners happy, and keep our brands in the heart of the people? And so that's one segment. The other segment is we're seeing this kind of increase into the retail cannabis space. We're seeing brands enter the retail cannabis space. We're seeing brands heavily expand and double down. We just saw the news out of Mindset Capital that Algorny's raised an additional $2 million from their investors to really grow their share in the regulated cannabis space. And so as we continue to see the regulated cannabis space grow, I think the next biggest question that remains, and what we talk about a lot, which I think is the most exciting, is hemp state rights. Are we going to see hemp state rights really stand? And so I think that's a big question on a lot of people's minds. And I think the most interesting place today for me is probably Tennessee. I think Tennessee is a really interesting place because we know that they have the framework. We know they have the infrastructure from a cultivation and manufacturing and processing standpoint. And we know that we have dedicated partners in that state who are actively making the majority of the hemp THC beverages that are being sold on retail stores. We also know that there is a framework to allow and support it. And so there's always going to be this question mark if the ban prevails and what happens after November 12th, but really starting to see a big opportunity in some of these state-specific hemp laws.
Yeah, so let's use that as kind of the jumping off point to answer some questions here, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what the mechanics of that looks like in that scenario. And so just to pick a very specific question, well, yeah, this one is actually directed directly to us from James. So like, what access to Vertosa IP and services will customers have post November 12th? And will Vertosa be fully supporting co-packers? And my initial response is like, it depends. It depends on the market, right? Like, and you were just pointing out Tennessee, like very, very supportive, has actually signaled in writing that they intend to maintain their market. They have hemp supply. They have various levels of the supply chain available there. So like they could very much create an encapsulated regulated hemp market, which looks very much like regulated cannabis or marijuana. Sorry, I know our audience is diverse in the verbiage that they use to define these different sides of the market. How are you thinking about that, knowing that we're supporting all these different co-packers in all these different markets, these different brands? Yeah. And I know it's been shifting every week because we learn more and more. Yeah.
I think for a lot of people who are listening and who may not know this about our business, but our business is largely and was funded on the concept of having a mobile unit. And so we have a multitude of mobile units and mobile technicians that rotate from state to state. That's how we support our regulated cannabis business. We have a mobile unit with a mobile technician who goes out to a specific state. We work in accordance to those state-specific laws, and we produce on site at those co-packers to ensure that they have the emulsion they need for further manufacturing. I think the biggest question remains, and Tennessee is one of the most interesting places because when you look at the alcohol laws, for those of you who may not know, liquor store owners are only allowed to own up to 2 stores. And so this creates a situation where there aren't chain stores in Tennessee. And so there's independent operators who may be willing to actually do what's necessary. What I mean by that is if November 12th happens and a federal ban commences, well, then you can't take credit card. And so an entirely new ecosystem needs to come out. You need to have state-specific banking. You need to have a way to either pick cash or debit cards. You need to have specific distributors that could be spawned out of existing distributors, or what we've seen in regulated cannabis is the co-packers buy short vans and small trucks and end up doing the actually deliveries themselves. And so this entire new framework is going to have to be spun up. But what we know about our space, hemp, cannabis, whatever you may want to call it, is entrepreneurs really find a way to operate in these very highly intricate markets and find tremendous success by ultimately creating a really positive situation or something that can ultimately be negative. And so I think that's going to be the interesting thing. I envision a world much like the first time I went to Minnesota. I remember walking into a store when they weren't selling hemp drinks in liquor stores just yet. But I walked into a liquor store, but at first they said, no, you have to come in this store. This is actually a cafe, and this cafe sells THC drinks. And if you go out of this cafe, will you get to the liquor store? And so I imagine these types of split scenarios where you have a separate cash register and you have a separate way of accepting funds, whether it's through cash or debit cards, and developing the back end supply chain that actually manufacture the products and get it delivered. But to me,
Yeah.
this is something that we've been dealing with for a very long time, and seems ultimately a solution that can be solved. It's just finding the right people and the right partners, and I think that's what we do best.
Kind of reminds me of that road trip we went on in South Carolina, where we went to the bottle shop, and it was like there was the liquor store entry, and then there was the beer and wine entry, and there was the same store but two different stores. Anyways, it brings up an interesting point, and it's reminding me of a conversation I had with Jason Dayton, who actually left just a salient point. What he said here in the comments is that a December extension will extend the sell down period, but distributors, retailers won't bring in new inventory. So it gives us more time from a regulatory perspective to continue lobbying and getting rules across, but it's not necessarily going to be a saving grace for these brands that are experiencing the drawdown. But bringing it back to Jason Dayton, him and I were talking recently about kind of the nuances of things moving into this more regulated phase, and 280E came up. And so we are actually going to be talking about the impacts specifically of finances. I think we're lining up a guest for High Spirits right now to really dive into this for like an entire hour of just like what are the tax implications if things move into this Schedule 1 framework. There's another question from Jillian talking about supply chain. And so how will the new federal definition of hemp change supply chains for state legal hemp THC products? And Diana, I think there's a lot here. We see on LinkedIn all the time, particularly from some of the far regulated marijuana side, of being like, it's not a ban. Like, why do you keep calling it a ban? Well, it's like, and then you have the hemp industry trying to explain that you don't have a viable hemp industry if this definition goes through. So
Right.
maybe let's answer like a handful of questions, like what does this definition actually mean if it goes through on November 12th? And what is that impact to the hemp supply chain? Like, should people be stockpiling, like hemp today? Will there still be hemp available after November 12th? Like, what's the perspective?
Right. And I think this is actually something Ryan and I have talked about a little bit in terms of brands that are manufacturing 0.4 milligram product right now, because manufacturing it later and dealing with the supply chain hurdles of concentrated work in progress material is going to be complicated or difficult or not be able to go across state lines. So if you want to be selling a 0.4, and again, hard to meet those numbers too, because technically 0.42 is a marijuana product at that point, right? So like if you're a little bit over, you have a marijuana product.
There's no error.
There's
Like,
no room for
no
error there. So like, really, I think people then end up being like, okay, is it a 0.3 milligram product? And again, there's a lot of questions about the viability of that in the marketplace, but brands manufacturing that now, I believe, are looking to buy themselves time to keep their brand alive versus thinking that's a long-term solution. Because one thing that we've made very clear as part of the beverage industry, talking with the wholesalers and the retailers, regardless of what happens on November 12th, or if this ban does take effect, whether it's November 12th, December, or whenever, it's how long before we can get out of prohibition, because we know there is demand for this product from the consumer through the entire alcohol regulatory framework. The wholesalers and the retailers want this product. So how long before we reopen this? So I think the reason we're seeing those products developed is to just buy themselves some time where they have product in market. They don't lose their shelf space. They're still out there. And then in the meantime, working on trying to reopen this category. I don't think anyone looks at those products as a long-term solution that gets them beyond a year. But I do think that's why we're seeing the manufacturing of those products start now, because they don't want to deal with the regulatory supply chain issues, which are going to be prevalent because can't move that product across state lines if it's over that legal definition. So you're looking at a mobile unit manufacturing production run, like Ryan said, then you're dealing with the wholesalers and how they can move the products. You're not going to find anyone with an alcohol wholesale license. That's a federal license. They're not going to risk that. Schedule 1, they're not allowed to touch. So I think everyone needs to be kind of aware that, like, from a supply chain side, this is difficult, but then even then moving the product. So I think that's why you're seeing manufacturing and brands launching those low dose products now, because they look at this as a part-time solution.
Yeah, I also just think it's a great product. I mean, I'm still looking for the
It's a different product.
keys.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that, like, it's not the same offering, right? It's a different product.
Yeah, I'm still looking for the person who drinks multiple 10 milligram drinks in a night. I haven't found that person yet. I'm looking for them. But as someone who has been experimenting with 0.4 milligram drinks for quite some time, I really enjoy it. It's like drinking a couple beers. You know, I don't really feel the first or second beer, but third or fourth, I definitely feel it. And to me, it's a great product. And I kind of got sick and tired of opening a 10 milligram, taking a couple sips, you know, switching to a Spin Drift or a LaCroix and keep going. And so it's been nice to have a kind of change. And so I welcome these 0.4 milligram drinks, 0.3, 0.35, 0.4, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, and I just want to hammer it home. So, like, Gary Kaminsky, hey Gary, commented, seed and whippy prohibition will create almost insurmountable challenges. And Gary is a lawyer. He's been watching the regulatory side of the plant for a very long time. He's been involved in the Schedule 3 hearings. So there it is, validated. Three non-lawyers just validated by a lawyer. So there you go. This is an interesting question. It's like, what doesn't change for our brands and industry, regardless of what is ahead in November? I don't know if there's anything in that column. I feel like everything's changing. Like I even brands that are thinking of diversifying into the regulated marijuana space, that space is changing dramatically as well. There are people who have been involved in the rescheduling effort, basically saying that, you know, Schedule 3, even if it's medical, is like essentially a backdoor to legalization of cannabis. And I wouldn't go that far. I think there's many steps that are necessary to achieve that. But, you know, all this work that people are doing to uplist on the NYSE is under the assumption that, you know, interstate commerce is going to be a fast follow, that opening up of markets and all this and access is going to be a fast follow. And the big question there is, like, does it lead to access to the new consumer, the different consumer that the hemp marketplace has opened up, right? And Ryan, you deal with a number of brands that have been doing this, or brands that we serve that actually already operate across markets. You know, a couple that stand out, and sorry if I leave anyone out, but, like, you know, Keith has been doing it for a long time. Uncle Arnie's been doing it. Senorita. How are these brands thinking about it? Like, we don't need to give away any secrets, but, like, are they excited about the future regardless of what happens in November?
I think they are, because I think for the first time in history, we actually saw a national campaign for beverages. I think for the longest time, we used to talk about, I mean, we've talked about this. THC drinks were 2%, 1.5%, 2.5% of the market. And I think for the first time, we actually saw non-cannabis consumers drinking cannabis. And so I think as a whole, these brands, regardless of their position, whether it's hemp, cannabis, regulated or not, I think they've seen something that we've never seen before, which is a surge. And so when I start thinking of a place like Ohio is a really interesting place, they had a huge hemp framework that was taken away. Those consumers haven't stopped drinking hemp. They're either crossing state lines, which we don't condone, or they're going into a recreational cannabis store and they're buying gummies or whatever beverages exist there. And so I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think, you know, markets like Missouri specifically that are very centralized into some close-knit places to hemp, again, people are going to cross state lines. I mean, the border town dispensary model has been one of the biggest opportunities in the dispensary channel forever. And I think we're going to continue to see that model really take shape and really form. And so I welcome all these new consumers who now want to actually talk about THC and want to come into the regulated cannabis stores. And sure, the experience isn't going to be the same. Selection won't be there. They may have to take a product that they're not necessarily happy with from a flavor standpoint or a branding standpoint. But at the end of the day, if they want to drink THC, they're going to find their way to drink THC. Um, again, don't condone this, but I think back to many years ago with Juul when, there was a ban on mango pods and flavored pods. And people still found a way to get mango pods for a very long time after the fact, whether it was through stocking up or knowing a distributor. People will always find a way if there's consumer demand. That's my personal belief.
For some
By
of the brands
regulation, it's better than prohibition.
correct.
I agree.
Yeah.
For some of the brands on the call that I know are, the question was originally, what's not changing? To Ryan's point, what's not changing is your target consumer and what they want.
Yeah.
So understanding that target consumer and the fact that they've been purchasing your product and they have a specific lifestyle and applying that to your potential pivot strategy. We all know if you work in cannabis or hemp, like if you don't have a plan B, like you should definitely have a plan B, if not a plan C, because we've always had to pivot. We've always had to be flexible. The number one product purchased with our products in liquor and traditional retail is Pinot Grigio. So like there's many of our target consumers are still drinking alcohol, just a different occasion. So understanding their lifestyle and seeing where you might be able to pivot and expand your brand portfolio, that might be of interest. And I realize that that isn't why people necessarily got into this space, but your target demographic is an adult beverage consumer. What does your adult beverage consumer want? And that would be something to think about as you're furthering your development of your pivot plan. So what hasn't changed is actually your consumer and what they want. It's just figuring out how to get them something that might be different or a little safer for the regulatory timeline right now.
Oh man, that is a perfect segue into our next segment about kind of our product portfolios and recommendations that we might have, things that we've seen, pitfalls, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get there, Jillian Shower is in our audience. I feel so honored. Thank you. And she said, how do you think marijuana markets need to adjust and adapt to absorb THC beverages in an approach that works for consumers? And I just had this conversation with the new DCC director, Clint Kellum of California. And it's about where the consumer is showing up, right? And it's just been very clear that many consumers are not finding their way into dispensaries. And I don't know if it's the way dispensaries are designed, that the fact that they're solely cannabis products versus how people are finding hemp alongside their other form factors that they're exploring, beverage alternatives, for instance. And so how do we get regulated cannabinoids into the places where consumers are? And those are liquor stores, grocery stores, corner stores, direct to consumer. I'm not advocating for any of these things, but these are where the consumers live. And so if we want people to have access to these beverages, we got to show up where they expect them. And frankly, we just haven't been able to prove in any market that that's broadly dispensary.
Well, and on top of that, the dispensary channel, when it comes to lower dose, those 10 milligram and under SKUs, they're thin margin, they take up a ton of space, and most dispensaries are not equipped to be able to carry those products. So on top of there being low traction, the dispensaries are like, the high dose stuff sells, those 100 milligram drinks, and again, still between 3 and 5% of the cannabis marketplace. But what I would say is, again, looking to buy your brand some time, maybe there are a couple marketplaces that are more advanced in their regulation for THC beverage within the dispensary channel. And if you already have consumers like in Connecticut, which has a regulated, marketplace, if you can try to drive them to dispensaries in the interim, maybe it's worth that, investment. But I think you really have to understand where your consumers are and who your target consumer is to see if you can do that. And then you're going to have to try to find retail partners that are willing to take on those low dose SKUs. And that's always been a challenge. They typically are not a moneymaker for dispensaries. And when you can sell flower or concentrate at $80 a pop and it takes up this much space with a bunch of margin, it's tough for them to justify putting beverage in there unless they can guarantee the foot traffic. Yeah. And we've never been able to do that.
And you could do it. It's like I've always wondered, like, can we start treating marijuana licenses like we do liquor licenses, right? Like, can a restaurant go and apply for a stackable license by which then you can serve the product? Like, that seems like a no-brainer to me. And in certain states, like California, we have Prop 64, which doesn't allow for the co-location of alcohol and cannabis, so that certainly creates a massive challenge. But we've seen legislation like New York, where there was the opportunity to take THC beverages into liquor stores. I don't know the current status of that. Sorry. And then there's interesting opportunities like in Minnesota, where like theoretically you could take the existing hemp laws and turn them into regulated marijuana laws and allow for that flow to happen. So again, I think all these hurdles will create opportunities for people to get creative. And speaking of creativity, and we talked a lot about this throughout the conversation, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the product and the portfolio under a ban scenario. Because I know people start asking us questions like, oh, are you going to do this? Or we do this? Is like CBD and CBG and CBN going to be available? It's like, in many cases, the answer is like, yeah, like cannabinoids will be available, but make sure you're developing a product that is going to be a product people want to purchase, because in history, we've seen the CBD market, like CBD beverages, it was not, there was no product market fit, in my opinion, right? And we still serve some of them. There's still a consumer, but it's not a growing, large, significant market. At the end of the day, people want an experience. And the question is the product that you're creating going to lead to the experience that you're promising to the consumer? And you're not going to do that with non-psychoactive cannabinoids, right? Or psychotropic, or whatever your word of choice is. And what I've recognized over the last several years of working in this industry and anything adjacent is that what you're probably trying to design is an adult experience. If you're in the space, you're probably trying to do an adult experience, and you're either delivering that or you're not. And this is my opinion. I'm gonna say just what's on top of my head. Ryan, Diana, you can debate me on this if you want. So it's like, if you're delivering an adulthood experience, so there's either like a regulated market for it, or you're kind of skirting the lines. And we've seen what happens with that, with like kratom and all these different other ingredients. Or you're kind of more in the functional beverage space. Are you doing like an energy drink? Are you doing something that's mood enhancing but not mood altering? And I think this is where we're really cleanly starting to see the dividing line with what draws the ire of the FDA, federal regulators, and whatnot. But like either way, the first question you need to ask yourself is like, what are you promising to the consumer, and what are you going to be able to deliver to them?
And how are you going to be able to explain the effect, which I think is the
Right.
biggest one, right?
Yeah, why CBG and CBN?
What does it do?
Yeah.
How does it make you feel?
Yeah. How do they make you feel? What you were saying, being a big fan of the point four. There's a lot of people out there that will probably be like, point four, you can't feel point four. You can't even guarantee that it's in there. Like, but you're saying that you can consistently feel it, and that it's leading to an enjoyable experience. Maybe not the same experience, but something that's enjoyable.
Absolutely. I don't think it's the same experience, but again, I still look for the person who's slamming a bunch of tens and going out to a concert and wants to get up and dance and have fun. I don't think that drinking 10, 20, 30, 40 milligrams of THC is going to put you in that mood. Not maybe my personal body. I think for me that zero point 0.4 milligrams combined with CBD or CBG have been an incredible experience for me in a social environment. Going out, barbecue, having friends over, hosting dinner parties, serving people product. Like I think that's really where on premise where I really see the big advantage. I also just think about like how these businesses were established, like distributors, retailers, bars, restaurants. Their business is serving as many items as possible, not serving one item and letting someone sit on it. And so when I think about that concept, the concept of higher dose products don't really make sense. And so I always believe that the consumer of today is a cannabis consumer, high dose cannabis consumer who wants to enjoy those products, or then it's people like me and you who take a couple sips, put it back in the fridge, and switch to something else, and hope when we come back it's not flat. That's just the truth. Yeah, I think it is the drink of the future, and I welcome a lot of people, but people probably think I'm some type of huge high dose user. Actually, the smallest tolerance ever, and
Yeah.
I can feel pretty much everything.
I feel like it's important to put out there, not to turn this into a brand coaching session, but like Gary points out here that 25 milligrams CBD and 25 milligrams CBG pills are very relaxing. I happen to know that somewhere around that ratio or quantity is actually very true. Like I sleep like a baby when I start taking doses that much. Like, however, that is a different competitive landscape. You're not a cannabinoid product. You are a relaxation product, and we've seen brands like Trip, for instance, really crush in that space. They've done partnerships with con.com and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, just know that if you do venture off into something cannabinoid related, but you might find yourself in a different competitive landscape, and you need to really understand what your competition is there. And it can get, the more, I guess, regulatorily neutral the product offering is, probably the deeper the waters, right? And so just be really honest with yourself. Like if you're going to be launching these additional products, we've seen hippie water, right? Beautiful product line, launched an energy beverage, has also launched a cold brew coffee offering. Really interesting. I think they've done a great job at kind of diversifying and growing their brand, but each of those products are completely new competitive landscapes. So it's a lot of work to gain that shelf space. Diana, anything to add here before we kind of move on to some of our final segments?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do want to call out while we have the attention of some of the brands, as I mentioned, whatever happens with the Senate CR, we are still going to have to, in September, really battle this out with the House and Senate as they look at their CR packages. It is going to be absolutely imperative that we continue the momentum we have right now with consumer engagement throughout August. Many members of CABA, HBA, and other groups will be meeting with their members of Congress while they're at home during August recess in their districts, making sure that people know how this industry, and particularly, obviously with CABA, I focus on beverage, but like understanding how this industry impacts that state and understanding whether there's farming that's happening there, manufacturing that's happening there, getting your wholesalers, your restaurants, whatever is actively happening in that market, getting them to join those conversations with you is going to be critical. The momentum we have through August is going to determine how much of an impact we can have in September, and therefore maybe impact what that CR ends up looking like, whether that's a short-term extension to get us just through the election, or if we're able to get more than we initially thought, and maybe we do get that full year in the September CR. So the momentum can't die after today. Like if the CR language from the Senate comes out today, we need that momentum to keep going. So I just encourage you guys to keep that in mind with your marketing programs of how often you want to touch your consumers with getting them engaged.
Amazing. Okay, speaking of engaging, I want to talk about brands and engaging retailers, not just brands, us, but like one of the questions that came through is that like, what is the most concise and clean verbiage to instill confidence in retailers right now? And I have a question about the question, right? Like, should we be instilling confidence in retailers? Like, in Diana, you're probably best to answer this, or at least to try to answer it. Like, how would you respond to that question?
I think most retailers have confidence in the category. I think we don't need to prove that anymore. We've seen the volume. We're seeing the growth across all retail channels. We're seeing Target expand. We're seeing Albertsons test this in their Jewel Osco retail locations in Illinois. I don't think we need to instill confidence in the category. I think that's there. I think we need to make it very clear to them that this could very much go away. I think there's so many groups I've spoken to at the state level are so used to how alcohol is regulated, where alcohol is not going to go away. Their state determines how alcohol is regulated, and there's federal clarity. as a result, they're like, it's too big to go away. You hear this a lot. You hear people saying this. Our industry said it for a very long time. I've been guilty of saying it's too big to go away. It's not. It could go away. They can make it go away if they want to, and they're very close to doing it. So I actually think that we should be calling the attention of the retailers to make sure that they know that this could be going away, because they know alcohol sales are down. GLP-1s are impacting much more than just alcohol consumption. That's impacting snacking. That's impacting restaurants and food, consumption, portion sizes. This is GLP-1s are having a massive ripple effect. We need them to be engaged and loud on this issue because they have political capital. Retailers and wholesalers at the state level have political capital that our hemp industry were just too new to have. So I actually think it's the opposite. I think they have confidence in the category. I think they need to understand that it could go away and what that means to their business.
You brought up Albertsons, Target expanding in this time period. That is just a very interesting signal. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do you interpret that?
I think, I hope they know something I don't, because that would make me feel great. But I think again, they know this isn't going away. So I think testing it, understanding how it best works will help them in the future, regardless of whether we have a stutter step in November. So I think they see the investment in this and what they're learning right now as something that will pay off in the future, regardless. Because we might have a stutter step, but this category is not going away. Intoxicating, THC products, whether we're using hemp or marijuana, these products aren't going away. We're going to figure out regulation over time, whether it's hemp or marijuana. But I think that that's what they're investing is the long term. We want to be ready and know what we need to do when we get regulatory clarity.
Awesome. Okay. I want to start kind of like winding this down, and then we're going to do that by kind of like getting into just some of our thoughts, like where our heads at, what's been surprising us, what's been motivating us, that kind of stuff. So I want to start, Ryan, with you. We did a lot of game planning together, how to prepare for this year, how to best support the network, like what we need to do, et cetera, et cetera. What has surprised you this year as all this has gone on? I feel like the uncertainty has kind of pretty much tracked the way we expected. Has there been any surprises from your perspective?
I think the thing that continues to surprise me is just how entrepreneurial our industry is. And I think I'm just always impressed to see how when people's backs are against the walls, the decisions that they're making to benefit their companies. And so, I give a lot of credit to a lot of the brands. I'm not going to call people out specifically here, but I've just been really impressed with the way that some of these brands are operating, the pivots that they're making, the decisions that they're taking, the markets that they're entering, and the new product launches that they're doing. Again, I think the thing that we love about our industry and the thing that we love about this business so much is the people. And I think it was incredible in the last 3 years to see what the creativity people were able to do and launch these brands and bring these products to life and put them on retail stores. I mean, we talk about this all the time. If you wanted to launch a vodka drink or an RTD, Total Wine's not calling you back. Specs and they're not calling you back. They don't even care. But you have 80 or 90 brands sitting on shelves that are doing meaningful volume of spin-off of an idea. And so I love entrepreneurs. And I think that's been the biggest surprise to me is just seeing how when people's backs against the walls, the things that they're doing. I think the other thing is the increase in the regulated market. I think that beverage was always just an afterthought. I mean, we always make this joke that I think you're absolutely insane, Ben, that 8 years ago you got into this business. And you dreamed about a world where THC was crossing over state lines and crossing over countries. And people thought you were insane. But 8 years later, I guess 8 years and 2 days from now, by the way, it's our anniversary in 2 days. And I see the world that you always envisioned. And so it's been interesting for me personally, just to see this come up. But now that regulated beverage is starting to really take shape and we're starting to see the innovation that came in hemp go into the regulated space, that's just been really cool. And so I've been a big believer in beverage for the last 4 years, and I continue to be a big believer. But It's nice to see other people in the general public believing it, not just us. Like, I think we're a little bit biased.
Man, you can make me blush. And wow, 2 days. I didn't realize this summer is flying by. Um, Diana, it was not that long ago that you and I were sitting there chatting and be like, we got to do something. We got to put together an organization to really make our voice louder and to bring these alcohol retailers in and bring these distributors in. And you were running the Cannabis Beverage Association at the time. That got wound down, and Cabo was launched. Um, and wow, what a force it's been able to become. And that alone is, I don't know if I would say surprising, but like it's just, yeah, it must be. I know it's rewarding from my standpoint. It must be incredibly rewarding from your standpoint. But um, yeah, what's been the biggest surprise for you? Like,
I think
where
I
did you
think
head at?
for me, I mean, that was 2 years ago that we started up Kava come September, which is wild because it doesn't feel like it was 2 years ago, but it's been 2 years that we've been lobbying federally on the Hill on this issue. And that's wild. I think what's most surprising to me, and I know that people might not feel this because we are facing this existential threat with this deadline, but the amount of progress we've made as a category, as an industry, of being something that's held up federal funding of the government. 2 years ago, when I got on the Hill, people were like, "What's a THC beverage?" Like, I don't have to answer that question anymore. And that's partially because of the wholesalers and the retailers and WSWA and all these other groups echoing what we're echoing. But we have made incredible progress. If you talk to other lobbyists from established entities like WSWA, probably NBWA, and a handful of others, they're going to tell you, like, this has been some impressive work. There's been a ton of education. Like, cannabis and hemp are complicated issues to explain to someone who has a million other things to try to understand. We have made actually incredible progress. And I know it doesn't always feel like that because it feels like, there's a fire drill every other day sometimes, or at least for me, my hair's turning gray over this. My THC intake's up though. But I think what's been most shocking to me is how much progress we've made and how many champions we brought on in the last year. Because the last year has really been pivotal, and I have all the confidence in the world that November, no matter what happens November 12th, beverage will be opened. I do not think we are facing a long-term prohibition period when it comes to low-dose THC beverage. I think that we have the momentum. People understand the alcohol regulatory framework, which is the safest alcohol regulatory framework in the world. People get what we're talking about and what we want, and they see opportunity with it. So I have full faith that we will be able to keep this alive. It might not be pretty, but I mean, what in cannabis has been pretty when it comes to a regulation? It's
Yeah.
difficult, but we will get there.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about regulators and some of these groups being like, "What's a THC beverage?" Like, and going back to what Ryan was saying, like I remember people saying that from the cannabis industry, and
Yeah.
it's just like to think, like, yes, like believe me, 8 years feel like an eternity, but also to go from like not existing to having this level of conversation and interest across the board, it really is amazing. And back 8 years ago. Like, we didn't know how this was going to happen. We didn't know how cannabinoids were going to be reaching consumers. And so the three of us, Vertosa, like we have a little bit of a different lens to all this because we did start in the regulated cannabis market, or marijuana, whatever you want to call it. We expanded into Canada, which is federally legal hemp, cannabis, same thing. And then across all the regulated state markets have started happening the way it did. No one predicted it. And at the end of the day, we still believe that consumers deserve safe, responsible access to cannabinoids. And we're going to be there to deliver that. And I think recently I've seen people that I met very early on in this industry that I consider OGs. Like I'm talking about like Amber Center from Supernova Women, Luna Stower, like just people that really care about this plant, people that historically have been perceived as regulated marijuana operators, right? Being like, what the hell is a civil war that's happening? Like, why are people like so blatantly protecting their fiefdoms and their profits and blocking progress in these conversations? And I think two things are surprising to me. One, that people are so willing to just be putting up walls and preventing progress for the sake of their profits. And two, seeing people like Luna and Amber willing to stand up for true advocacy and realizing that we are in purgatory right now. Any legalization that has happened to date is not true cannabis legalization. We are not legal, and we are not accessing the consumer, and we are not destigmatized. And so there is so much more work to do. And I want everyone here to know that, like, we will be here to do that work, no matter where the cannabinoids are. Hemp, cannabis, November ban or otherwise, like, we're going to be there. We're going to be prepared to serve this market however it needs to do to kind of keep pushing it forward. And we'll continue to be doing the work on the Hill, the states, because like we truly believe as a company and as an industry, and anyone watching, I know you do too, like Jim Ickes, Gary Kaminsky, Jillian Shower, like y'all, and Kimmy, you too. Y'all are the people that I know really do care and you want to see it happen. And of course, it's very complicated. There are many stakeholders, many conversations, but this is the hard work that needs to be done. So whether Diana's right or wrong, I hope you're right. Please you're right. But like, this will get there. And Jillian's putting in her obligatory camera statement. Does not lobby this very. Oh God. Yeah. So thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. I hope this has been helpful and informative. We will do it again. Diana, Ryan, any last statements you want to leave our friends with?
One thing I'll say that actually came up at the CanRec conference that Jillian hosts every year. I think everyone has this idea of what legalization looks like and what it will feel like, and that we'll have like this moment where we're like, hell yeah, it's legal. Legalization is going to look like regulation. And when we're debating standards and regulation, that's actually the legalization. Creating the pathways to access is legalization. Like, I'm sure there will be a damn good party at one point, but regulation is the legalization. So, and that is going to probably include taxes, everybody. But that is legitimizing the industry. So whatever vision you might have for legalization, it's probably going to look and feel different, but it's going to create the pathway that we want for safe access for consumers.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say, I mean, hard to top that, but I think the last thing I would say is just thank you. And a shout out to all the people doing everything. There's so many people on this call in this industry fighting every single day to make sure that this happens. And so just a huge shout out to all the entrepreneurs out there who are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that this happens. So thank you for everything that you do, and we love you graciously.
You could have just passed it off as a Canadian idiom and not a US one.
Yeah. There's no hemp here, so we don't leave that.
All right, everyone. Ryan said it perfectly. Thank you. Keep fighting, and thank you for everyone participating today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.